Alright, so this inner layer of cells here that's right against your dermis, that's going to be your stratum basale. Alright, so you'll notice that a lot of the cells here have granules in their cytoplasm. Alright, most of these cells are keratinocytes. Your melanocytes they're making your melanin, and once the melanin is made, it's transferred to your keratinocytes. So your melanocytes actually are going to look, okay, so this is a melanocyte. So notice pretty much all you're seeing is a nucleus, and the cytoplasm looks unstained. Alright, so remember the melanin is transferred to your keratinocytes. So you're going to see the granules in the keratinocytes and not in the melanocytes. So the cells that are unstained, those are your melanocytes. The ones that have the granules in them, those are your keratinocytes. Alright? So your melanin granules are going to be found in the keratinocytes. Then, so that's your stratum basale here. Here's another melanocyte here. Alright, so again, the cytoplasm is unstained. Alright, and the melanocytes usually are found in the stratum basale. Alright, so you have your stratum basale, that's the innermost layer, and usually it's just like a single layer of cells here, and you'll see a lot of granules present in those cells. From here, pretty much all the way up to about here, that's going to be your stratum spinosum. Alright, once you get to this this outer layer here, this is your stratum granulosum. So again, notice the cells have granules in their cytoplasm. Alright, so they look granular. So that's your stratum granulosum. Alright. Above that, usually in thick skin, you'll see kind of a translucent layer of cells that's right above your stratum granulosum. That's going to be your stratum lucidum. So you only see that in thick skin. In the thin skin, you're not going to see that layer. And then above that, you have your layer of keratin, which is your stratum cornea.
Did we just get the spinosum?
No, she just did it.
Oh,
So remember your spinosum. So this is your granulosum. Below that, that's going to be your spinosum. Alright, so these cells that don't have any granules in them. So this is your granulosum. Right here where the arrow is sitting, that's going to be your stratum spinosum. And then as we move downwards, you have this,
cornea?
no, stratum basale.
Oh, spinosum.
So corneum is the layer that's facing the outside. That's your layer of keratin. The basale is going to be the layer that's closest to the dermis. Alright, so actually since we're here, you guys remember what this structure is? Identify this structure. Yeah, Meissner's touch corpuscle. Yeah. Alright, so you'll notice that with your dermis, you have kind of these upward projections of the dermis. They form like these little papillae that go upwards into the epidermis. So these are called your dermal papillae. So these are the upward projections of the dermis. That's known as your dermal papillae. So that's where you're going to find your Meissner's touch corpuscles. Alright, so your dermis is divided into your papillary dermis and your reticular dermis. So where you're finding your dermal papillae, that's going to be known as your papillary dermis. And then probably from about here down to here, that's going to be your reticular dermis. And then below that, where you see mostly adipose, a lot of adipose tissue, that's your hypodermis. Alright, so we have our epidermis here. We have our papillary dermis, where you have the dermal papillae projecting upwards into the epidermis. Your reticular dermis, where you pretty much have your dense regular connective tissue. And then where you're seeing a lot of adipose, that's your hypodermis.
You see it lot of the Brazilian corpuscle.
Yeah, I have a slide with that I'm going to show you. Alright, so we saw Meissner's Coach corpuscle. This is a slide with the Pacinian corpuscle. So remember, the Pacinian corpuscles are huge structures. You find them mainly in your hypodermis. So this slide is a little bit, the staging is a little bit light. But you see these huge structures. This is at 4x. So it's pretty much a low power ID. Alright, so remember, they just look like a cut onion. And they're large structures that you usually find in your hypodermis. Alright, so we have our epidermis up here. Again, this is our thick skin because we have this very thick layer of keratin up here. Alright, so that's our epidermis, that's our dermis. And as we go down into the hypodermis, we can see these large structures. So those are our Pacinian corpuscles. Alright, then, let's take a look at the pigmented skin. Alright, so this is a slide of pigmented skin. So again, it's relatively thin skin because you're not seeing much of the keratin layer here. So with this one, the layers are going to be, they're not going to be as distinct as we saw in our thick skin. But we can identify a few of the layers here. Alright, so we see our stratum basale here. We see the cells with the granules inside them. Then we have our stratum spinosum. The stratum granulosum isn't as distinct. And then our stratum corneum. So remember, in the thin skin, you're not going to see the stratum lucidum layer here. Alright, so actually this is just an artifactual space. The keratin is pulling away from the granulosum layer. Alright, so that's patient here. So we can see a melanocyte here, and then these cells with the granules will be our keratinocytes. Alright, so you have, in the lower layers, you have your sweat glands. Let's go back to Alright, so notice you have these larger cells. Again, if we go to high power, they tend to look like they have little droplets in them. Those are your sebaceous glands. If we go into the lower levels of the dermis, you're going to see these glands. These are your sweat glands. So notice these cells are much smaller. They look a little bit similar to our sweat glands, where you have the secretory cells forming that rounded structure there. Alright, so these would be our sweat glands. So most of the glands that you're going to see are your eccrine sweat glands. Alright, so when you look at the secretory cells, you're going to see pretty much, you're not seeing much of a lumen here. You're just seeing the secretory cells, kind of forming this rounded structure. With the apocrine sweat glands, they tend to have a little bit larger lumen, and the cells pretty much look similar, but the lumen is a little bit larger. Alright, but most of the sweat glands that you're seeing here, these are your eccrine sweat glands. The mammary glands are an example of your apocrine sweat glands. Those are kind of modified sweat glands, so I'm going to show you those in a minute. Alright, so most of these that we're seeing here are your eccrine sweat glands. So we have some here, here's some more over here. Those are the sebaceous glands. So again, these are sebaceous glands. And then those would be your